Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of 1 Corinthians. In the last couple of days, we've looked at 1 Corinthians chapter 8, where Paul is answering the Corinthians' question about food or meat that had been sacrificed to idols. Could you eat such meat or not? And we notice that Paul's answer was yes and no, depending on your knowledge. Now, that at first might confuse us a little bit. How can the answer be both yes and no? How can it be yes sometimes and no at other times? Well, in the Christian life, there are different types of issues. There are some issues that are absolutely black and white, either yes all the time or no all the time. Questions of morals, questions of loyalty to God, the answer is always clear all of the time. But then there are some other issues that are not black and white, but are gray. And sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes it's no. I want to take you to a comparable passage to 1 Corinthians 18. This comparable passage is in the book of Romans, chapter 14, where Paul is talking about similar kind of issues. And in this chapter, he calls these issues disputable matters. Notice what he says in chapter 14, verse 1. Except the one whose faith is weak, without quarreling over disputable matters. Now, by disputable matters, he meant those issues where sometimes for some Christians, they decide one way, and other Christians decide another way. So some say yes, and some say no. That's what Paul says about these disputable matters. One person's faith, he says, allows them to eat anything, but another whose faith is weak eats only vegetables. Now, the one who eats everything must not treat with contempt the one who does not. And the one who does not eat everything must not judge the one who does, for God has accepted them all. Who are you to judge someone else's servant? To their own master, servants stand or fall, and they will stand, for the Lord is able to make them stand. One person considers one day more sacred than another. Another considers every day alike. Each of them should be fully convinced in their own mind. Whoever regards one day as special does so to the Lord. Whoever eats meat does so to the Lord, for they give thanks to God. And whoever abstains from meat does so to the Lord, and give thanks to God. For none of us lives for ourselves alone, and none of us dies for ourselves alone. If we live for the Lord, and if we die for the Lord. So whether we live or die, we belong to the Lord. So for this very reason, Christ died and returned to life, so that he might be the Lord of both the dead and the living. You then, why do you judge your brother or your sister? So in this passage, Paul makes it clear there are some issues in the Christian life that are disputable, and different believers might come to different conclusions depending on their knowledge and the level of their faith. So you take this passage in Romans 14, and then look at the passage in 1 Corinthians chapter 8, and we realize this matter of eating meat offered to idols is one of those disputable matters. So some Christians are convinced that because that idol is nothing, the meat that just happened to have been sacrificed to that idol is unchanged, so you can eat that steak if you want. Other Christians are convinced, well, since that animal was a tool in idolatrous worship, it should not be used for anything by Christians, and therefore they will not eat that meat. They will not eat that steak. So one Christian may decide it's okay to eat the steak. Another Christian may decide it's not. Paul says it's a disputable matter, and thus we leave it there. Some might say yes, others might say no. That's okay. We will not judge each other. We all stand before God on the basis of our knowledge and our faith and our life. Now, this is in regard to disputable matters. There are other matters in the church that are beyond dispute. These are matters of morality and loyalty to God, and all Christians must be in agreement on these, such as worshiping only the Lord our God. That is not a disputable matter. That is an absolute. Living a life of moral faithfulness, that is not a disputable matter. That is an absolute. So be able to distinguish between those matters that are black and white, that are absolute, and those matters that are gray, that are disputable, where there can be some difference of opinion between Christians. And Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 8, the matter of eating meat sacrificed to idols is one of those disputable matters. So some believers say, go ahead and eat the steak. It's okay. Others say, don't eat that steak because it has some association with something that you don't want to be involved with. So there could be two decisions, and that's okay. It is a disputable matter. Join us tomorrow as we continue our 5-minute Bible study in the book of 1 Corinthians.